Hello, listeners. This is Janine
and Kristen
from Henrico Casa. You are listening to our podcast, Vigilant Voices. Living life every day. Hello, listeners. We're so happy you are joining us today to talk about children's well-being and our mutual desire to be vigilant voices on behalf of children.
Yes, we love having you with us on this journey to know more about the challenges facing children and families so that we can ensure no child faces continued abuse or neglect.
Correct. And over the years, as I've done lots of reading and studying and conversing about children's well-being, a theme that really is very consistent that often arises is the need for stability.
Yep.
So again and again, stability is noted as one of the most important factors in a child's emotional and cognitive growth.
Yes, I agree. I feel like it's just a theme in like everything I read.
Exactly.
And to me, when we say stability, that would mean predictability or consistency, kind of security in a child's environment. And so it includes things like a safe home, consistent caregivers, predictable routines, and emotional support. And, I think the theme that we see or what we hear is that when children have stability, they feel safe and are better able to develop confidence and resilience, which is what we want.
Right. And this, I think, makes so much sense on that foundational level.
Agree. Right? Yeah.
At the same time, the opposite is also true.
Mm-hmm.
When a child's world feels very unpredictable, it can create a lot of stress and negative emotions for them.
Yeah, which unfortunately is what we see a lot in the children we serve at CASA.
Yeah, especially when we are first appointed to their cases. And so what we also know is that when children experience frequent changes, and that could be like moving homes or shifting between caregivers or having very inconsistent routines, they can feel anxious and unsure about what to expect.
Yeah.
And then that uncertainty can affect their behavior, emotional health, even academic performance. They're just not into it.
Yeah, which makes, it affects adults too, like in similar ways, right? So
structure is very good.
Makes total sense. And for children, stability is closely related to just the sense of safety for them, right? If there's a routine and a stable environment, children will develop a sense of predictability and kind of just a sense of certainty for their future. Yeah. There's just, I'm trying to think of how to explain it, but there's like a confidence and a hope that kind of comes out of stability.
And it's why schools are so important. Too, right?
Without a doubt.
They definitely fall into this stability and structure and safety.
That they need.
So in contrast, though, if there are frequent and significant changes, then that, unpredictability can foster anxiety, helplessness, confusion, feelings of being lost or maybe even frozen in time, like that kind
of like a stuck feeling.
Yeah.
Really good. And that's what we saw with the two little ones I was going to tell you about today. I'm going to refer to them as Sam and Hannah. Okay. And so police found these two toddlers walking in a parking lot late at night in diapers with no adults around.
Okay.
Yeah. So it took a little searching, but police were able to find their mom in a nearby apartment. And she was in an intoxicated state and just wasn't coherent.
Right.
So
I know what was going on.
Yeah. So Child Protective Services was called to move the children to a safe environment, and they ended up living with a foster family. Okay. And so that's when we, CASA, was appointed to serve Sam and Hannah. And so their advocate got involved in their lives, and their advocate learned that Sam and Hannah's mom just kind of came and went in their lives and moved them around frequently.
Right, which then means too much instability in their very young lives if they were still both in diapers.
Exactly. And that's what their CASA advocate decided he wanted to address first, like how to establish long-term stability for these little ones.
And oftentimes that means one of the first steps is identifying the right adult to be their caretaker.
Yeah, right. And for Sam and Hannah, that turned out to be their biological father.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, their CASA advocate helped find their father, and that was the start of their path to stability.
Oh, that's a cliffhanger.
Yep.
So as usual, I can't wait to hear more, but that's a great start of the story.
Yeah, and I can't wait to finish it for you. So, okay, before we dive into this, let's pause and listener, let's say real talk, like a perfectly stable childhood with zero change is not realistic, right? Like that's just not life. Life is full of changes, some positive, some negative, but we can count on things changing.
Right. I mean, change can be good. Right? So, yeah, some can start out feeling negative, but then maybe they actually offer an opportunity for growth or new experiences, which actually turn out to be the best thing and positive. Right?
Way to be optimistic about change. Yes, we need that. It is 100%. And some instability, right, is the result of just adult decisions that have to be made. Like you might need to take that new job that moves to a new school district, or, this new marriage may mean blending families and sharing bedrooms. Then you have things like, the death of a pet is just an unavoidable loss or change, right?
And so I think we have to also ground ourselves in it is impossible to have just complete stability and consistency in life.
Yes.
That just doesn't happen.
It's not going to happen.
No.
But when life throws us curveballs, we can intentionally build stability into our lives, which really helps children have the security they need.
And hopefully the tools to then help guide them through those changes.
Exactly.
So in my mind, listener, it begs this question, what are then some practical ways that we can try to create stability for children?
Yeah, and luckily there are a lot of ways. We'll give you a list like we always, we like to list. We kind of revert to that. Yes. So thinking about stability, I know for me with my kids, I've always found, maintaining consistent daily routines to be crucial. Right. So maybe that's, a regular wake up time, regular meal times, bedtimes, maybe even like small rituals that are consistent, like reading together before bed.
I think that's great. It's just routines that help them feel safe, but also just know what to expect, which can then lead to feeling secure.
Right. And I think, in our house, like when people have been feeling secure, maybe we get more lax with these routines because it's just a predictable cadence to life, and that's fine. But when there's a change coming or something gets shook up or is out of the ordinary, we tend to dig back into those routines.
And I think that's good because routines can offer a level of comfort, even if sometimes it feels, like a regiment, right? But it's really, really important.
Exactly.
So then another important way to build stability or security is to focus on emotional stability.
Oh, I like that.
So we have the sort of physical stability, but now we're talking emotional stability. And so ideally, caregivers should be reliable and responsive, providing a steady source of comfort and support.
Yeah. And so at CASA, we kind of see the opposite sometimes, right? We see the negative impact on children when they're living with adults who exhibit, like big swings in emotions, whether it's because of substance use, mental health disorders, stressful life situations.
Physical abuse.
Yeah. It just, the children are left kind of living in fear because they just don't know what to expect.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes they would say they feel like they're walking on eggshells.
Yeah, and how stressful, right?
So stressful. And it then makes for a very unhealthy environment.
Yes. And, foundation-wise, we want children to be living in environments where they feel safe and loved.
Yeah, not chaotic. Right? That's a problem.
Yeah.
And so, again, when we think of the children that CASA serves, we are often providing insights and then making recommendations that we hope will offer stability for the kids.
Yeah.
And we really try to avoid frequent moves or losing connections with people who may already have relationships with that child. So we want safety and stability as quickly as possible for the kids is what we're really seeking.
Right. And it's, almost prioritized over perfection, if that makes sense, because it's not about finding the perfect home or the perfect caregiver or the perfect scenario. It's about finding a consistent home and a connection.
Right. And I briefly mentioned it, but I think this applies to consistency or stability within their school.
Definitely. That's their life at that age. I mean, that's everything.
And so keeping children in the same school when possible really helps them build relationships and feel a sense of belonging. And it's amongst their peers and their teachers and their guidance counselors.
Right. And, encouraging those relationships and friendships and consistent social interactions, it just reinforces their sense of stability.
Yeah. And I think I just again want to reiterate that, like we said earlier, life happens.
Right.
So it's impossible to have complete stability or predictability in life. It's just unrealistic. And I think we all know friends, family who, something comes out of the blue and we have to deal with it.
Yeah, we can't avoid those curveballs, right? And so I think that leads to another tip that I wanted to make sure we talk through, was that we can try to help keep everyone's expectations reasonable, right? Like we can remind the children in our lives that life does shake up sometimes, and that's normal.
Right. I mean, it's good to have routine and consistency, but they do need to understand, though, that things are not always going to go as planned. And so learning to be flexible and adaptable can be hard at times to teach, but if it's taught and modeled well, it can turn into strengths, because
Definitely.
that is a trait or traits that we need to navigate life.
Yeah, yeah. And so we can be proactive in kind of setting that expectation with children, like, XYZ is coming up, so let's all know that our normal routine may be off a bit, just kind of letting them know something's coming, but it's okay. Like, it's going to shake things up a little, but it's okay.
And that's, I think, just being sort of honest and transparent of, I'm going to tell you about this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it in advance, and then let's be prepared to be flexible, right?
Yeah.
If you're traveling, who knows how that might go.
Right. And let's also be prepared to practice being kind and understanding towards each other. Right. Because, this change, this move, this disruption, whatever it is, will be a challenge. And so we're going to extend extra grace to one another. Right.
And as we've just always talked about on this show, each child is unique. And so some children might be better able to handle those changes than others. So that is just being patient, and kind, right? So I like that. And that setting those right expectations and just being open in advance can make a huge difference.
Definitely.
But it sounds like for Sam and Hannah, life was happening to them very fast, and they were clearly much too young for any type of rational talk about being flexible or trying to understand the situation. And so maybe can you share a little bit about how CASA maybe helped bring stability to their lives?
Yeah, without a doubt. Their CASA advocate brought so much stability. And part of that's just with the nature of CASA's role and consistency in visits, right? Just in general, advocates bring stability by showing up on a regular expected basis. So it turns out that the mother had taken the children and disappeared from the father's life. Like, he hadn't known where they were for a period of time. But now that the children were back, he did want to take custody of them, and he wanted to create a stable home for them. But he needed the support of his CASA advocate to pull it off. English wasn't his first language, and that had kind of prevented him from pursuing supports and services in the past that he probably needed. So with the advocate's help and guidance, he was able to connect with the resources that the children needed, including things like getting them enrolled in school and connecting them with ESL, English as a second language supports, and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic that the advocate sort of knew what was needed to give the children what they needed.
Yeah.
And so, it sounds like the father just needed a little help and encouragement to get started on those needs.
Right. Like, he had all the right desires and a high level understood that the kids needed stability. He just didn't know kind of how to put that into play.
Or what services are there to help.
Right. And so while he was gaining custody of the children, their mom actually moved again out of state this time. So Sam and Hannah's CASA advocate helped set up video calls for the children because, again, even though the mom was kind of becoming out of the picture, they needed a sense of stability. And so this advocate helping set up consistent calls to talk to their mom was really important. And so the advocate would visit with the kids to prepare them for the calls in advance, to kind of set expectations. And then this advocate supervised the calls. And that added support kind of built up around interactions with their mom really aided the kids' sense of safety and stability.
Yeah, I think that's great. And as we always say, when we hear the stories and then, the positive outcomes or paths that these kids are on, I'm just so grateful for the role that, in this case, this advocate played in Sam and Hannah's lives. I mean, I think they needed a clear sense of stability, and it sounds like now they have it.
Agreed. It's the kind of happy ending we love and we hope for. So listener, we offered a few tips today for kind of adding stability to children's lives, even if they may be in the midst of some change or instability.
Yep. And just as that quick recap, those tips were creating or maintaining consistent routines, focusing on emotional stability, so calm, even, predictable responses, creating safe, consistent spaces at home and school.
Yep.
And then, setting expectations around the need to be flexible.
Yes, I love these tips because they're practical and encouraging, right? But before we wrap up, I feel like we need to kind of pare down to one final piece of advice that we should leave everyone with. Like, what's our call to action going to be, Janine?
Pressure's on. I think it's probably focusing on maybe the small everyday moments.
That's great.
Stability, we think about the big things, but it isn't always the big things.
Right.
So it can be about just the small daily interactions that show children that they're loved, that they're valued, that they're safe.
Yeah.
Something as simple as sitting down for dinner together without those phones can make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's such a positive note to end on. Let's all find a small everyday moment to focus on. Thank you for listening to Vigilant Voices, Henrico Casa's podcast. We have a vision for all children to live in safe, healthy homes. You can help us make that happen. Tell a friend about our podcast and find us on social media.
I believe in the better days.